Hi, Dave here, and today we've got a quick win for you, which is going to be getting weather data from an API. If you like the video, click like and click subscribe down below, and don't forget to come along in the comments and tell us any future demos that you'd like to see, and we'll see if we can get those created. So today's demo, drawn it up on the board, it's just a simple logic app. The trigger at the top here is going to be a just running once a day timer. Then we're going to go into a for each loop just to get the data for multiple cities, and then within that we're going to call out to the weather API that will return that data for us, and then we're going to pop it into Blob. We're also going to have a condition to make sure that was successful, so that we could send an email if we wanted to off to notify somebody of a failure and that sort of thing. So with that, we'll dive straight into the demo. So for this demo, we're going to be using OpenWeatherMap. This website provides weather data for any location that you happen to be, and it's got a free and open API. I found this just by searching Weather API online, and it came up as one of the first results. And you can find APIs for most things these days, which will provide you data. Some you have to pay for, some of them are going to be free. So this one has a limitation on the free account, in terms of which APIs you're able to use and in terms of how many results that you're able to get. For my purposes, I just use this for demos, so I hit the API once a day for a couple of locations and put that data into my data lake. But if you're using this at an industrial scale, or if you've got lots of locations, then you're going to have to subscribe and kind of pay for the data. In here we've got current weather data, we've got historical data, bulk historical data, lots of different ways of getting that weather information that can be useful in your analytics solutions. There's a documentation section for each, so this is the one that we're going to be using today, and there we've got that API call, and we just put in a city name or a few city names and we get that weather data back. So a good example just here of query equals London would return the weather for London. So hit the sign up button, fill in your username, email, and other details there. Confirm that you're not a robot, and then sign up. So I'm already a subscriber, so I'm just going to sign in here, and we'll go from there. So once we're logged in, we get through to the settings, and in here we just go to API keys, and it will give you an API key. If you have multiple use cases, you might want to generate more keys just so that you can separate them. So give each one a name. So I've just got my default here, but if you've got two different analytics solutions that you're getting weather data for separately, or if you're using it in an app or something like that, then just label that and use it as you need to. So that's all we need from here is the API documentation and the key, and we will then go over to Azure and set up a logic app to get that data in. So now we're over in the Azure portal, ready to set up the solutions. So I'm going to go to resource groups and set up a resource group for this demo. So just click add. And then give it a name, so call it QuickWin Weather. And I'm going to use the Central US region. The region isn't really important for demoing, but you may want to set this up for a production system. So onto the tags, I normally put in a tag just saying demo, so that we know what the resource group is for, and we can then use that to find it more easily later and delete it. If you've got production workloads, you might also be looking for the production version of a certain thing, and you can just use those tags in here. So if I just take demo, then that gives me just the demo one. So if I come in here and it's currently empty, we'll then just add some stuff in here. So the first thing that we're going to add is a storage account, and this will be our data lake. So data lake is not a product, it's just a term that we use for a collection of data that's sitting at rest. So we've got the data lake storage gen 1 there, we've also got the storage account blob. These can be pretty much used interchangeably depending on what your current use case is. If you're using any kind of Hadoop products, then data lake storage gen 1 might be the better solution because it's an HDFS compatible storage solution. So in here we're going to just find that QuickWin's weather that we've set up. I'm going to give the storage account a name. This might as well be random. Don't try and have naming schemes for your storage accounts. They're public, so somebody might have already taken one of the names that you've decided that you're gonna want. So generally, if you use a date and your last name, that probably won't be taken. So it's nice and easy for demo purposes. Again, we then choose a region, and it doesn't have to be the same as the resource group, but I do just from OCD perspective. So I'm choosing standard. It doesn't actually matter for this demo what storage version we use, but I'm just going to use v2 general purpose because it's the latest. Drop this one and put it to local redundant storage though, just because it's cheaper. And because we're going to be accessing this, we're going to choose hot storage, and then we're going to go next. So we don't require, we do require secure transfer always. That's just, you should always have that switched on. We don't need to connect to a network, and we don't need the preview data lake storage stuff. So I'm not going to tag this one because I've tagged at the resource group level, and I'm just going to go next and create. So my validation's passed. Click create and off it goes. So once that's deploying, we can then create another resource, and this resource is going to be the logic app that we're going to use to go and hit that API. So we're going to give this a name. So again, I'm going to go QuickWin weather, and choose the resource group, use existing, and then we're going to find that QuickWin weather. And again, central US, don't need log analytics, I'm just demoing here. Obviously in a production workload, you might want to make different choices for these things. But here we're just showing off the logic app functionality and how to get weather into your solution. So while we were creating the logic app, the storage account finished being created. So I'm just going to click into there. And then I'm going to go to the blob section. And we're going to need to create a container for our weather data, and we will call that weather data. We're going to need to set this to private because we're not publishing this out to the internet or any of those kinds of things. And just click OK. And that then creates us a container. And we're just going to dump our weather data into here. And then later on we can process that with something like Data Factory or some other logic app, or we can just read that directly into our application. So our logic app has finished creating. now. So we go into this, and then we're going to go to the Logic App Designer. And we're just going to create a blank Logic app for this one, just to show you starting from scratch. There's a lot of options there that you can choose from if you have a need that's covered by one of these standard examples. So in the Logic app, we need to first add a trigger, and then we add a bunch of actions. So I'm going to start off with a recurrent schedule, and I'm going to set that to run once a day. Really straightforward. So we can also do things like set a particular start time, or just run at specific hours, just like a kind of cron job sort of a thing. But actually our needs are very simple. So we're just going to do this, and then we're going to add a next step, and here we're just going to create a variable, and that variable is going to be an array of cities that we want to get weather data for. So I'm going to call it cities, and that's going to be an array, and the array is in JSON format. So we need to just format it like this, and we're going to choose Reading UK, and every line has to have a comma at the end in JSON format, apart from the last one before we close out the array. So we're also going to choose London UK, and we're going to choose Manchester UK. So just because these are three of our Microsoft offices. So I want to get the weather data for those. You may have stores in various locations, or that kind of thing that you want to get weather data for. Or you might just want arbitrary points, or a city in each country, or that kind of thing, just as a collecting the data. So next we're going to set up a control type. So this is going to be a loop, and that loop is going to be a for each. So what we want is to run for each of these things in the array. We're going to call the API with that data. So literally just put in the cities variable from this choice list down here, and then we've got a box that is our for each loop. So if I click new step down here, that's going to create me an action outside of the loop. So once this loop is finished, it will move on to this. We don't want that. What we want is to add an action inside of the loop, so that it runs over and over again until it's finished working its way through that variable. So in here we're going to do an HTTP, and we're just going to go for the standard one. If you have Swagger definitions on your HTTP API that you're calling, you can use the Swagger version of this. So the method is a get, because we're getting the weather data file from this service. And I am going to cheat here and just copy from Notepad the API. And then in the queries, we're going to put the app ID. That's going to be our key that we got from the service earlier. So just paste that one in. Then we're going to have the query, and this is going to be the current item. And you can see, because we're in the for each loop, current item has now just appeared in our variable list. So nice and easy. We don't have to remember anything. We don't have to type anything. It's all kind of there. And finally, on this API, we want to set the type of units that we get back, because by default it's SI units. First time I did this, it came back and said the temperature was 200 and something Kelvin, and I don't understand that kind of thing. So I've chosen metric here. If you're in the US, you might want to choose imperial. But just go through the documents for the API that you're calling and make sure that you're calling the correct options in there. And that's all we need to do there. That will then go off, hit the API, come back with our data. What you might want to do here is put in a kind of another control for condition. So that condition, we might choose to have the header from the return, and maybe we want to check that that's a status code, and we want to check that that status code is 200, which is a success in HTTP language. That will then give us the if true, then we carry on. If false, we might want to send an email or log a condition or that kind of thing. I'm not going to set up an if false in this instance, so I'm just going to go down the if true and assume success. Don't assume success when you're doing this in production, because you might not get a success, so then you'll have a problem with your app and you might not know about it. So under here, we are going to pass the JSON, which I think is under data operations, pass JSON. So what this is going to do is it's going to open up the response from the API, and it's just going to take out all of the individual properties from that and return them as variables for me to use. So the reason I'm doing this is I just want the name of the city back out of it. So at this point, we need a sample payload to generate some schema data. The way that we do that is by just calling the API once. So here I've got the API's address, and then I've appended app ID equals my app ID, ampersand Q equals Reading, UK, ampersand units equals metric. And this is just what's happening inside the Logic app anyway. When we hit enter, this gets us a copy of what's going to be returned. So I can then copy that data, come over here and say use sample payload to generate the schema. We can, of course, also just use the schema that's provided for us by the API documentation. And when we run that, it will just take that information and it will create us a schema based on what it's just seen. And that's normally good enough. Sometimes you don't get the full information back, so you might need a few tries at this to get it right. But that should be good here. Next thing, we're going to add an action in here to just create the blob. So if I do a search for blob, Azure Blob Storage, and here we're going to say create blob. And we're going to choose the one that we created earlier, which is in QuickWin Weather, and we're going to just give this a name. So again, QuickWin Weather, and click create. This creates a connection that we can then use to talk to the blob storage, and then we're going to click the browse button and go to weather data, which is where we want to save this. And for the blob name, we're going to call it name. So this is a variable that was pulled from the JSON file, and we're also going to choose, and that name is going to be the name of the city, and then in here we're going to use a date function to put a date stamp on it, so that within our blob storage we're going to have loads of these. Each of them is going to be named with a date stamp. So I happen to know it's format date time, but you can browse for these, and then open bracket, and to get the current time and date we just do a UTC now. That returns a date stamp for the current time, and we're formatting that to get the kind of string that we want. And then we want a 4-digit year, and I'm going to use dashes here. You can do pretty much what you want. 2-digit month. Note though that those are capital M's, and 2-digit day. And there is documentation on this custom date format, but I use this one all the time because reverse date format sorts nicely and all that kind of stuff. So we click OK on that, and that then just gives us that formula in there. And for the blob content, we are going to go back to the HTTP and just get that body, and that's what's going to be written into our blob. So that's the logic app completed. You can choose some advanced options in here, and it'll allow you to kind of specify the content type. But that's our logic app done. So we then hit save, and then we can do a run through and just check that this actually works. So then the logic app runs and returns, and we see ticks on all the ones that succeed. If any of them fail, you'll just get a cross on there, and you can browse through and kind of see what happened at each stage. Here we can see the blob content that's being written, so we can see that it did actually return the data that we wanted without necessarily going off to that blob storage. Here again we can see the contents of the file, the schema, and the outputs that we generated. And we can click through and just see the raw outputs of that information, which does match up exactly with the content. So if I come back up to QuickWin Weather, go into my storage account, and then into Storage Explorer. And then we browse to blob containers, weather data, and you can see we've now got London, Manchester, and Reading as JSON files within that container. So I can then double click on one of these, and it will then show me that result. I'm then free to use this in any other application that I've got internally. So quite often we would use this with Data Factory as part of an analytics or a machine learning application, and in here we can see the London weather is light intensity drizzle. It's got an icon there, temperature 9.39, that's degrees C, pressure 1022, humidity blah blah blah, minimum and maximum temperatures. So really useful stuff, and very flexible, and you can just add as many locations as you need and build on this. This is just a building block to a larger solution, but there's the quick win for today.